Hello, folks. Welcome so much. Welcome to our webinar today. Thank you for joining us. My name is Marcia Butler. I am the webinar director here at Advice Chaser. And before we introduce our guest and get started, I need to do a bit of legal housekeeping. Advice Chaser, the host of this webinar, is not a registered investment advisor. We cannot and do not give financial advice. Today's presentation is for educational purposes only and cannot be considered advice for any person's individual situation. Advice Chaser regularly hosts informative webinars such as this one, featuring a variety of knowledgeable professionals, many of whom are licensed advisors. Any opinions, ideas, jokes, or principles expressed by presenters are their own, and however true, funny, or interesting, are not endorsed by Advice Chaser. Please do not act on the information you hear today without consulting a qualified financial professional. We're thrilled to bring you today's educational presentation. Attendees are muted, but we do encourage you to ask questions and make comments using the chat box. The presenter will answer those queries during or after the webinar today as appropriate. If you ask a question in the chat box, go ahead and leave your phone number as well. If we can't get to your question during the event, we'll make sure someone reaches out to you after today's event. We want this experience to be as educational as possible, so please don't hesitate to ask for clarification or expansion of the material. I'd love to introduce you to our speaker today. Sean McElderry is the CEO and founder of Monarch Wealth and Retirement Strategies. He is a certified financial fiduciary and has over 22 years of experience. I know it's probably a little more than that now, Sean, of experience in the financial services industry. As financial professionals, Sean and his team are committed to helping people create solutions for their retirement assets. Once they understand risk tolerance, time horizon, and goals, they work to develop a program that carefully balances investment strategies with preserving principal. And Sean, I'm going to go ahead and turn the time over to you.
Thank you, Marcia, and appreciate everyone for joining today. Before we get started, I just wanted to kind of, because we're getting into a topic here for a lot of folks that times are kind of nerve-wracking when you think about retirement planning. So if we kind of think back to before we started our jobs and had all these ideas of one day retiring, think about like maybe what that looked like in your mind. If you could kind of think about what you hoped retirement be. And you could even leave a comment if there's something you really wanted to have in retirement or a goal, or what does the purpose, the perfect situation in your mind look like if there's something that you're trying to really achieve. So as I go through today, I'm really trying to kind of tap into some of the things that kind of keep people from getting maybe to the next level, or maybe not taking advantage of things they're not aware of. And I think that's really a big thing these days is we're bombarded with so much information that the question is, are we getting the right information? And that's what I'm going to try to focus on as we kind of jump into this here. So, and don't feel so inclined to read some of the bullet points. We have a few that there's just a little bit to it. So this is going to be a little bit about what we're going to talk about. You know, every journey starts with a single step. We've all heard that quote before. And when we think about starting into the idea of planning, whether it be retirement or any goal financially, you know, having someone that's in your court is going to really help you to find things that are going to basically improve your situation, your outcomes, hopefully. And so you hear all these terms: financial advisor, wealth manager, broker, stock trader, there's insurance agents. And the question is really, who's the best fit for you? And it really does depend on what you're trying to do. I think a lot of people these days get confused with the difference between having some investments that they threw money into and having someone actually manage towards a goal, manage towards having a plan. And if you think about it, there's a lot of different statistics on this when you Google it, but the lion's share of people in this country do not have a financial advisor. The bulk of us rely on 401ks or things that are simply, you know, put in front of us when we signed up for a job. most of the people we talk to, even when they tell us that, you know, they're heavily engaged, when we start asking them questions, they don't really often know what they're doing, but they feel good about it sometimes. And so that's kind of what we want to dig into, is that people often get stuck here, because when we start looking at stuff, if you think about all these different competing entities that want to help somebody, they all tend to have very positive and negative things that you're going to find if you start researching. So I want to try to kind of pull back the curtain on that a little bit and help you understand, like, you know, if you're really looking for someone to help you with everything versus maybe you just need help with one component. So behind that, kind of understanding your emotions, educating yourself, looking at things maybe from a different way. And then also, when is the best time to have this plan, whatever that plan is going to be, so we can move forward from there. So emotions, this is probably these days one of the biggest parts of our job. You know, what types of emotions you're going to feel as you're getting near retirement. I've met with hundreds and hundreds of people over the 23 plus years that I've been doing this now. And the one thing that is consistent is many people are afraid to even start a conversation. You know, the fact that you are all on this call today says that you're taking that step in trying to improve and figure out, what can I do to make things better? People are worried they're going to lose purpose when they retire. They're going to be bored. They're not going to have those friends that they go out to lunch with every day. They're going to be stuck doing chores at home, whatever the case may be. But then also people get very excited about it. And there's of course a point where you might want to do something different. So kind of identifying what things you identify with early on and addressing those can set yourself up for a better retirement. And some of that is just really maybe the thought that retirement isn't you sitting and doing nothing for the next 20 years staring at four walls, but maybe having something that you want to do in that next stage. So I think that's really important to put some thought to, because most people do take a good 6 months to a year to really adjust to it that we talk to. But the one thing I've found over the years is I've never had someone come back to me and say, you know, Sean, I really wish I didn't retire. I was just loving that job so much. I mean, people, they do have those things that they really want to keep doing, but they find other purpose. And I think that's the point. The ones that have the hardest time in retirement really don't have any outside social life, don't have anything that they kind of pursue. It's like work was everything, and they walk out the door and then they kind of hit that wall. So that's why the quote down there at the bottom isn't by anyone in particular, but it's really just the fact that many studies have shown that this is the most second stressful thing to losing a spouse or going through a divorce. So know that when you're going in, is try to prepare ahead of time. So what's the danger of letting your emotions kind of rule things? First of all, when we talk to people that have not done planning or had a conversation, the biggest challenge they face is sometimes there's an unexpected retirement due to a health event. Sometimes there's a situation where maybe, you know, their job is downsizing. We could be facing some layoffs over this year with everything going on in the economy. So if you start having the conversation before that happens, to be prepared for it, especially when some of the employees that we work with that are looking to retire are getting early incentive offers. So they're being told, hey, we'll give you extra money to leave now. But if you don't know where you're at and have had the conversation maybe with your significant other, it's hard to make those decisions in 30 days in the midst of being thrown some offer. So I can tell you from dealing with many, many people, the ones that we've been helping for 2, 3, 4, 10 years that then get some kind of an incentive program, their walk out the door is so much less stressful. Just the whole process is easy. The ones that don't do anything have a really tough time. And so that just kind of goes to that same thread that if you have a plan in place and you actually see that it's working, it brings a lot more comfort, I think. You know, the other thing is we work with a lot of clients that are managers, they're executives, they run their own business. And do you think that they are used to micromanaging their life? That they like others to tell them, well, you should do this and you shouldn't do that? It can be hard. And we find that some of the smartest, most successful people have a really hard time when they're working with a financial advisor because they simply don't know how to take advice from an outside entity. And so I like to really kind of, this is, if there was one thing you could think about that, because we think we have all this information out there because we're on Google, we have the news, we have social media. But the question you have to always ask yourself is, what lens are you looking through? We've heard of the term tunnel vision, right? Where you see down what you're looking at. And so I'm going to kind of get into the psychology behind that a little bit. It's kind of like if you think about taking a picture of something and you can only see a small center of that picture because of what people are presenting to you. And it could be literally from when's the best time to take Social Security to do you need life insurance? Do you need long-term care? Should you retire younger or older? Should you pay off your mortgage? There's just a plethora of these questions. And these are what clients ask us all the time. So when the emotions are part of that, when you have limited information and the emotions are part of that, it can really shift you into possibly a place where you're making decisions based on the wrong thing. So we can go to the next slide, Marche. So what should you know? Well, that's part of the problem. It's really going to be dependent upon where you're at in life. This is one of the things that is challenging for retirement planners is we don't always know what each person's situation is until we have an in-depth conversation. So the things that people really should know is, if I'm going to retire, can I replace my paycheck? Okay. Can I get a cost of living adjustment to have that raised to keep up with inflation? Do I have emergency money? When is the best date for me to go? Now, again, this is one of those tunnel vision areas where we're all told that it's either 59 and a half or 65. And of course, us Americans, we're going to work till we drop at our desk in most cases. But if your question is, how do I get the most money? When is the best time financially? Especially if you were ever thinking of doing a secondary career. We have a lot of people that retire, maybe in their mid 50s and they want to go do something else for 10 years. Maybe they get a second, interest that they didn't want to always do what they did since they were 23. So when you look at all those pieces, we really want to analyze, what's your debt situation? Should you pay it off? When's the best date to go? Do you have an estate plan set up? This is one of the biggest overlooked things. It's all part of the retirement planning process. Do you need one? Do you have a trusted person that does it? So a good financial planner is really looking at every single aspect of your financial life, your tax life, your legacy, your estate plans, your wills, all of those pieces, Medicare, Social Security. This is not just someone putting your money into an investment and hoping it grows. There's a lot of layers to this. And I think, so when people, we hear this all the time, well, do I really need a financial advisor when I can just put it in I've been making money in these investments, and we'll talk about that. Recently I've heard a couple of people say that our industry is the second most complicated to being really in the legal or medical profession. Additionally, we're one of the highest in oversight. So for someone coming in from the side that's trying to understand all these pieces, it's not that you can't do it. It's just the question is, do you want to? And do you really understand it enough? So I think that's a key thing. As far as starting early, why does that help you? I think really because sometimes proof is in the pudding. A lot of our clients start with us 5, 10, even way earlier than that, years before they retire. So they start seeing that what we're doing is helping them and they feel more comfortable. So whoever you're working with, you want to give them a test drive. You want to put them on the barbecue and turn up the heat, as I like to say. Okay. So I always say, ask good questions. Put those things out there to the advisor. Don't be shy about it and say, what do you do for me? How do I know you have my best interest? So we'll get into that a little bit too. Go ahead to this one. So this is a good example as a case study of something that commonly happens where we talk to someone, in this case, it's a manager, pretty smart guy. He's been around for a while. He's been investing on his own. He's got a 401k. He's expressed to me that, this is a similar case that I just talked to probably a couple of weeks ago where, he told me how he's doing really well in his 401k. Other than the fact that last year's been rough, he's happy. And so we showed him a sample plan of some ideas of what we were doing and compared it to what he was doing. And I said, well, what do you think? And his wife was with him at the time. And she says, well, you need to change this because this isn't doing as good as we thought. And this is a common thing where what's good is all relative to what else is available out there. So you have to know what's available, considering there's almost 25,000 mutual funds in the country. Most people have access to about 30 to 50 in their 401k on average with the big 401k plans. And if you're in a smaller one, it could be much lower. It could be a lot significantly lower than that. So in this situation, here's a guy that's, in his late 40s. He's not necessarily looking to retire right now. So can an advisor help them between now and when they go? Of course, we can help teach them to maximize what they're doing in their plan. Maybe they want to use some things outside of the plan. Maybe they have some old 401ks where we can actually take those and put them into one IRA and get them into a situation where they have better choices, possibly, not always, and try to help match their goals. You might say, well, I also want something safer. 401ks are not typically known to have options that are safer. They tend to be pretty much in things that are going to fluctuate unless you're in cash for the most part. So in this example of a case study, we have a lot of people that are resistant to talk when we engage with them because they think that they're doing fantastic. And I would challenge you to at least have a 20 or 30-minute conversation, waste somebody's time if that's what it means, and at least see what's out there and what they can do for you, rather than just assume you're doing great, okay? Because we see, I would say, 8-9 times out of 10, when we review people's plans, they're not doing nearly as well as they thought they were.
That's interesting. And so just so that people understand the time commitment, you said waste 20, 30 minutes of their time. Is that something you can do with an initial kind of phone call with an advisor? Or do you have to be a client of theirs officially before they can run some like back of the envelope scenarios just to see?
Yeah, that's a great question. Whether you're working with another advisor, whether you don't have one, most advisors these days are happy to have a consultation where what I call it is a financial checkup. Okay. And what we're really doing is no different than if you went to your annual checkup for your doctor. Is we want to check, what are you in? What are you doing? Let's analyze it. Let's take a quick look at it, ask you some questions. And people, a lot of people I think are resistant to this because they're either embarrassed of what they have, they feel like they're being judged, they feel like they're not worthy. We're going to talk about that a little bit. And so they kind of keep putting this off, but they also feel from when I kind of get past that part with them, most of them feel a sense of relief in knowing that someone can actually come out and actually help them, where even though they might have thought they had it, they do like to have that backup. And here's a funny thing too, that I always tell clients, even if you really like doing this from experience, the question is, if you're the one running that money in your house, male or female, doesn't matter. I have many of both these days. Okay. Do you want to be the one that gets pointed the finger to if something goes wrong? Okay. And I think people, they really don't think about this. And I have a really good story about, some family members that made mistakes, and the other spouse 30 years later still brings it up, because it was just one of those times where, they told them to do something and they didn't. And it's one of those conversations. So it's nice to have an advisor in the mix because they really can bring a couple together and enhance what they're doing, because it just validates or possibly invalidates a misbelief, so that at the end of the day, I always believe that most people want the same thing. They're looking for a good outcome. They're looking for good return, and they're not looking to get taken advantage of. That's one of the concerns people have. So whenever I think about examples of people, I think really just think about where you're at in life, and is there a chance it could be improved? Absolutely. There's never been a person that I've talked to that we haven't been able to find something that they were unaware of that we could make better. So, but yes, you could get a complimentary consultation, Marche. Emotional education. You can go to the next slide. I'll just, this is where we talk to people all the time, and I'll ask them a question like, okay, are you currently feeling comfortable with the market? Do you want to be aggressive, moderate, safe? Where are you? And they'll tell me. And then we pull out their statements and look at it. And I mean, we had someone recently that it couldn't have been, it was almost comical, because I asked them, well, how are you feeling? And they're like, conservative. And we literally pulled up their 401k plan and hit the allocation in big capitalized letter. It says very aggressive. And, so quite often people's investments don't match what they feel, or vice versa. So an advisor can be really good at helping kind of get those aligned better. The other thing is, think about why you feel the way you do. Okay, when you think about the market, the biggest thing we hear people say is, I don't want to be aggressive because I don't want to lose money. That's a very common statement, and I would always throw back to people, well, do you think I've ever had an aggressive person tell me, Sean, I'm going to send you over 100 grand. Could you please lose my money? Okay. And no one's ever told me this, oddly enough, but people are always inclined to tell advisors they don't want to lose money. What that means is you probably need to understand the way things work and what the options are differently, because you really need to take a look kind of behind the scenes on how it all works. And we can walk you through that. And I've taken many people through that process. So a good advisor should be taking the time with you to really educate you on, like when we first started, what the steps are to getting into retirement, or whatever goals whether it's school or travel, or you want to buy some crazy house somewhere, and then getting your emotions in check. Okay. Who are you talking to about your investments in retirement? And now we always joke, if you're talking to people that just talk to me or another advisor, and they said to me, oh, I didn't realize that. So this is very common. We have employees that say, well, my boss helped me. Okay, well, is your boss an advisor? Well, no. Well, do you know I just met him last week and he knows less than you do? Okay, this is kind of a comical thing, but it does happen, where we've had this happen many times. We have one boss that's telling 30 people what to do with their money. And it's not that the advice isn't great. It's just that you should probably take it up a notch on who you're getting your life plan from. Also, when you're talking about especially retirement, do you think that your colleague that sits in the cubicle next to you, or in the Zoom home office, wherever they're at these days, do you think that they're looking forward to keeping working while you're bragging about leaving in a year? Do you think that sometimes jealousy weighs in? We've had many people that they went and told their colleagues, hey, I'm leaving, and they literally get insulted. They're told, are you dumb? I mean, it's really crazy what people will say, because they're afraid and they're stuck at work or whatever the situation. So be careful of who you ask. Be careful of what generation you're in and who you're talking to, because if you talk to my grandparents and what at those times how they did things, it was a whole different way than today. So if you have older relatives giving you advice, take it with a grain of salt. Take it, run it by an advisor, your accountant, depending on what the information is, and really try to get under the hood of what's going on here. Some of the big common ones are, you got to work till a certain age, you got to pay off your house. While that might be true for you, the question is there other ways to look at it though? And people are getting smarter about these things. How is fear and anxiety affecting you? You've got to be aware of your anxiety. So we're going to talk about that, aware of your emotions, and can we look at things a different way? So go ahead to the next one, Marche. So we want to check your brain. So this gets a little bit outside of the scope of retirement planning, but I always tell people that probably 80% of my day I spend not talking about investments. I spend not talking about return, risk, asset allocation, diversity, all these buzzwords you hear. I'm usually helping people get past these emotional barriers, preconceived notions, what they saw on Facebook or some whatever. Okay, so we'll just kind of go through these one at a time. Sadness. If you are in a state of sadness, which does happen, we had some clients that lost spouses through COVID. We get these phone calls. They when people are sad, studies show, and kind of some of this stuff here is from a gentleman that really deals with the emotions behind how we deal with money and how we deal with things, really sharp insight. So he kind of has this thing where he talks about the grass is always greener for people that are sad. They think someone else is getting it better, and they're often more likely to take risk and accept unfair offers. So if you are in a state of sadness, be in check with that emotion. We can go to the next one, Marche. If you're disgusted, you might just have this opinion that all investments are bad. It's the evil world of profit. And while that may be true, you also know that you have to retire and pay your bills. So how are you going to deal with that conflict? But if you are disgusted, then let's teach you some things on what can be done. If maybe in this case, I just said, you're not into investing because it relates, but it could be anything that's causing you to feel this way. Sometimes when you're too close to that feeling, it can cause you to just not want to deal. So we see where we'll talk to people that literally just don't want to have the conversation because they figure all advisors, all investments, all information, it's corrupt, it's wrong, it's bad. Have the conversation. That's like you're here today, you're getting some insight. Fear and anxiety, this is huge right now. Because again, people tend to take a little bit more risk when they're afraid in some cases, oddly enough, when they're scared, because they just kind of process the information differently, but they can also be less likely to make risky decisions. So it can go both ways with fear and anxiety. In this case, they look at the grass is full of snakes. Okay. We can go to positive. There's not as much on the positive side, pretty typical. Happiness. People that are happy, interestingly enough, tend to be risk adverse. They tend to be better with delayed gratification. So they really are a little bit more inclined to be like, I'm making money. I didn't lose much. They also tend to be a little more confident in how they feel. So it's kind of like that opinion of almost like, well, my grass is good enough. And, if it doesn't look good, I'll fertilize it and wait, see if it gets better. But do any of these emotions lead to maximizing your money while doing it in a way that you're comfortable with? Not necessarily, because it tends to lead to being a little bit passive. It tends to accepting what's in front of us because we're happy. And the last one is gratitude. Kind of similar to happiness, people that are grateful tend to actually make more risk-adverse investments and tend to be trusting of others because they kind of have that attitude. Well, I really appreciate that this is going well, and I'm just happy that I made something. And if someone offers them something, they might be willing to take it, even if it's not a great deal, just because they're very appreciative. So who would this person be? Maybe the person that didn't feel deserving of an advisor. Maybe they were referred to an advisor from a family member and they're working with them and they offer them something and they just don't question it and they accept it for what it is. Gratitude can be a little bit of a caution as well. So all of these kind of have a thread of you need to be aware of how this could affect your money. I also think socialization is huge. We work with clients of all age ranges and demographics and nationalities, and you will find that certain people from their culture, from who they were raised by, were they raised by their grandparents, their parents? How was their dad with money? How was their mother with money? Was it a single family, struggling mom at home? Okay. How is that trickled down into you and affected the decisions you're going to make? And it's really important here because our role models might have been horrible with money. Or maybe they were coming at it from a whole different standpoint. Maybe you had wealthy parents and you haven't done so well, or vice versa. If your parents were barely making it and never really were invested, probably not the best role model if you now have assets that you need help with. So we need to think about, if you're going to be working with somebody, and think about is how you manage your personal finances. If you were hired by a major Fortune 500 company to manage the money for that company, my question is, would you keep your job? Okay. So I think it's important because people say, well, I don't have millions of dollars, Sean. Well, that's fine. So what you're saying is because you don't have millions, you're less important. So I would actually reverse it. People with less money need more help. The people with lots of money, well, they still need help, but maybe they got there because they were taking better steps along the way. So if you just think about that, if you were managing a company's money, would you say that your strategies are great? Are you putting in the time? Are you researching it? Do you have the background? Are you clear on all your choices? Have your beliefs changed currently? So is there anything that's changed in your mind since your childhood? You know, for maybe maybe you were aware that, hey, I don't like what my parents did. I'm going to do it different. Maybe you never thought about that. As far as going into the future, you know, I kind of tried to bring a little bit of that Apple part of the presentation is, do you want to get an upgrade to U 2.0? Okay, we're gonna update you. You know, how do you get to that better place going forward? And I think that's really where we have to start thinking about what we want and having a plan. So on the right, you'll see this little piece here that says confirmation bias. This is really the tendency to seek out information that supports our pre-existing beliefs. Okay, this is like, you got to be really careful. And I've personally experienced this where I was looking up something online and I kept wording it a certain way. We then engaged with this particular situation. Let's just say it was a purchase that was made. And then after the fact, regretted it. And then went online and Googled a negative way of looking it up that was not in line with how we initially did it and found all this other information. Okay. Confirmation bias is huge for literally anything, looking for a doctor, making decisions. Just when you think about, if you're trying to always seek out what your beliefs are to reaffirm your belief, to make you feel important. Now, this might not feel like financial planning, but it absolutely is, because this is what we deal with constantly, is helping people get out of this emotional lock that they're in to where they think they don't need an advisor. They don't need help. They're going to do it all on their own. They don't deserve it. So the confirmation bias is important because you've got to be careful about looking up things to just make you feel better. Like, do I really need a financial advisor? You're thinking, I don't need an advisor. So you Google that and you find all these articles. No, you don't need it. And then they list all the reasons why. Or you could say, is living with a financial advisor the best thing for me, or could I be better with one? So as you start shifting how you think about what you're trying to understand, what you're really trying to do is, like, when I go on and look for my favorite restaurant, I have to know that there's always a few crazy reviews that I have to look past, like the guy that leaves 1 star because he didn't get a return phone call, right? We've all seen that one. Or mad because, you know, they left the forks out on his takeout food. And it's like, but that's, you give 1 star for that? So you have to average it, right? It's the same thing here. You have to think about the information. So go to the next one, Marche. So reframing our emotions. Loss aversion. This is a big one. People actually hate losing more than we like winning. Okay. Now, this is important because this often causes us to do things like panicking and moving all of our assets to cash, not knowing what we're doing. That's a big reason for loss aversion. But the funny thing is when we sit down with clients and really show them what's going on, not always, there's always going to be people that are just stuck in what they're hearing on the news. But I had a person just the other day that we walked through this. She was only looking at what was going on from basically January last year to January, February this year. And in her mind, that's what existed. Okay. Something to be aware of is they say that investors only remember the last 3 years. And 08. They always remember 08. Okay. But in general, they only remember the last 3 years. You probably don't talk about what went on in the 70s and inflation in the 80s and all these different things. But we also become more aware when we're closer to retirement, because you weren't thinking about that when you were 22. But now that you're getting up there in age and you're getting closer, suddenly everyone's driving a blue car because you bought a blue car. Okay. So it's the same thing here with loss aversion. If everyone on the news is talking about how dangerous it is, and again, tunnel vision, it's that one moment in time, you have to pull back and really look at what has the market done over the last 100 years, 20 years, 10 years. There's so many things that you can do that aren't related to just the market as well. So knowing those things is important, but also understanding that if you make the right decisions, you'll probably win more by not letting that emotion push you. Alignment, we talked about this earlier. Make sure your portfolio matches your goals and your emotions. Okay, it does me no good to help you set everything up if you're like, Sean, if my portfolio so much as drops $1, I'm going to have a heart attack. Okay, we might have some solutions to that to kind of work around it, but we want to make sure it aligns with how you feel, because otherwise you're just getting in and out, and that's not going to help you. Be open to options that might help you with your goals and help you sleep at night that you might not be aware of. Okay. Unfortunately, most people's experience with investments, for the most part, started with their 401k because they were kind of just thrown into it. But imagine if you woke up tomorrow with just a whole different financial picture. You had millions of dollars in the bank. Ask yourself, how would you think about doing that? Kind of similar to the business. Would you do it differently? And if the answer would be yes, then why would you do it differently with what you currently have? As far as your outlook goes, I would say the biggest question here is just, is your way of thinking the only way to tackle a problem or come up with better ways of success? Again, it goes back to how we were brought up. It goes back to what we're seeing on the news. And I can tell you right now, as a financial advisor watching the news, it's probably similar to a doctor watching, like, you know, one of the medical shows on Netflix or the long running, you know, like Grey's Anatomy. Okay. Yes, there's a sliver of reality here, but there's a lot of stuff that just doesn't apply in the real world. And, you know, look, all of these places are trying to grab your attention to make money on their commercials and their headlines. But the question is that shifting your outlook to a place that's helping you or hurting you? Okay. And what I hear on TV and a lot of these things, it's not helping you. You need someone to kind of bring it down to earth. Use trusted sources. Who do you get your advice from? You know, if you're listening to the news, one-sided sources, okay. I was watching something the other night on the news, and I'm not even going to go into specifics of it, but what on a really simple level, the person was talking about the whole banking crisis. Okay. I'm not going to get into that really today, but in general, hopefully things are on the right track. I think that they're doing things to keep it going in the right direction. But then you have people come on TV that pretty much it was doom and gloom. And, you know, what you should do is this, and you should go buy this. Now, I thought, interesting. He just went to a whole end of world scenario on a legitimate news channel and then suggested that you run out and buy this one particular investment. So I looked the guy up, and guess what? The only thing he sold was that one investment. I mean, like, really? Okay, so this is the type of stuff you have to be more aware of. And we'll try to talk about that if I have enough time, as far as like how you're picking an advisor based on what they offer. Okay, can I afford it? This is the biggest question, is you got to think about what you need a month. Okay, many advisors that we talk to that we meet at different functions will blatantly tell you, I don't retire people very often. I randomly get someone that's referred, but most of our clients are this or that. You know, retirement planning is kind of a beast of its own, because it's not just taking someone's money and putting it into something and then watching it over a period of time. You're now taking a piece of money. You're having to have a way to pull from that money and make it last, grow, keep up with cost of living, and doing it in a tax efficient way. So you cannot have an advisor, we call it a yellow pad retirement plan. What that really looks like is the advisor asks you a handful of questions and then pretty much just says, yeah, you can go, you can't go. They just like throw this random number at you. We spend typically 3, 4 to 5 hours planning, putting a presentation together, going back and forth. That's just to do the initial plan. So you really want to have someone that's going to get under the hood and do this for you. They're going to run the numbers, what's called a cash flow analysis. But now running a cash flow analysis is only good for that moment in time. As soon as you walk away, it automatically starts to go backwards. So the type of plan we really like is where we create a live plan that takes all of the information from your investments, tracks them, and then allows you to monitor that over time. So you're basically having a living, breathing plan, as I call it, that you can look at as you're getting closer to those goals, whatever they be. Understand what your strategy is. Do you have a strategy? I mean, there are books written on investment strategies. And whether you want to be passive, tactical, what type of strategies you're using, what kind of money managers, how you're putting the money in. So if all of that sounds like a lot, and then you start to think, well, I could just use this and it's very simple, you should really think about maybe learning about some of those strategies or having someone help you with those. We ask a lot of questions about a lot of topics when we're talking to someone. Okay, it's probably the second most personal conversation, or maybe the most you'll ever have about money, because many people don't talk about money. It's not like you went to dinner with the family and started saying, oh, well, I have 400,000 here and my social security is this, and I do have Alzheimer's in the family and my grandparents both died of cancer. Who talks about these things on a daily basis? So part of this process is also getting your brain around all the different moving parts. Okay. Let's see, Marche, we can go on to the next one. Okay. So this again, I won't spend too long on this case study. You can go to the next slide. Goals, dreams, and plans postponed. Okay. I worded it this way basically because we've seen so many advisors that are not retirement planning experts, that don't do this as their career, give bad advice. We've had employees miss opportunities because they were told, you can't leave, you got to work till you're 80. I mean, we've heard all sorts of crazy stuff. We met a couple recently that had recently met two other firms. They were both told, don't leave, you can't do it. These other advisors, whether they were well-intentioned or not, I don't know, but the problem is they didn't understand their company. They didn't understand the offer they were being given to retire sooner. And luckily we were able to come in and help them, and they did go on to leave. But the biggest thing for them was like, why would these other people tell us this? And I asked them a lot of questions about what they went through, and they're like, well, they didn't write a plan, they didn't show us the numbers, they just threw out a number. So the reason I say that is be careful who you're getting advice from. Make sure that they live, eat, sleep this. Retirement planning is not having some person on an 800 number press a button and buy you an S&P fund. It really isn't. That's a misconception, I think, in our industry. So when people say, well, what are you paying for with a financial advisor? You're paying for someone that knows all the mistakes and has seen them, hopefully not made too many. Personally, I was mentored for a long time, and I was taught a lot of the things to not do, so that I can sit back and say, I haven't made those types of mistakes that were of a problem when it came to retirement planning. We've seen it. You don't want to be the person that's going out making retirement mistakes, because you probably don't want to work for another 30 years, right? Because it's hard to do at 60 something. So in this case, like I said here, get a written plan that has ongoing monitoring. And you see the quote here: to accomplish great things, we must first dream, visualize, plan, believe, and act. Most people do the first one pretty good. They dream, and sometimes they will act, but there's nothing in the middle. Okay, that's kind of like, I have a dream, one day I retire, and then you wonder, well, why did your coworker suddenly come back 3 years later? Okay, that's because there was no plan in there, or they went off track a lot. So those are the types of things I'd say there's always a better way to be more prepared and try to get those dreams on track with a plan. What should the plan include? Well, like I said, a detailed financial checkup. It should be an actively monitored, living, breathing plan that you can go log into and look at where you're at. We can show you, or any advisor that has this type of software can show you how to do that. Transition planning help. What is transition planning? That's really what a financial advisor is. It's more about helping somebody anytime they face a financial change. Getting married, having kids, loss of a loved one, buying a business, selling a business, retiring, selling a house, buying properties. Whenever you're doing any of those things, our clients call us, they engage, they say, what should I do? Having a holistic plan kind of goes in that same thread. We're looking at all the moving parts. Do you need a living trust, tax planning, budget? Do you have a business that you run? Do you have a succession plan in place? If you know how many people own businesses that pass away, unfortunately, unexpected, and the spouse gets completely messed up because the business was not set up and the name's right, it didn't pass on to the heirs correctly, that can be a huge problem. We can bring in experts for that as an advisor. Insurance planning, a lot of people have insurance they simply don't need. Okay. We talked to someone recently, he had no retirement plan, but somehow someone sold him an insurance policy so that if he dies, he would leave it to his 2 kids because he was divorced, or actually was single. His wife had passed. So here he's paying for a death benefit for his kids, had no retirement plan for himself. Is that a good plan? Maybe for some. I don't know if the kids are going to let you move in. As far as Social Security, Medicare, when's the best time to take it? We will illustrate all that. Don't waste your time reading all these. I mean, you can read anything you want, but I would say if you go online, they tend to get biased information again. I tend to think that it leans towards making people take it much further out, which may be a good idea for some, but for others, taking it earlier can actually be a huge benefit. So that's something that we can run numbers and show you a side-by-side comparison. Any advisor should be doing that. Let's see what the next slide is, Marche. So I would say to kind of end, and do we have any questions, Marche, by the way?
Yeah, we do have some questions. So why don't you sum up and then we'll open it up for questions.
Well, I think just in summary, really, and I wanted to kind of go deeper into the emotion behind this, because I think when you're thinking about retirement planning, there is a lot of that in there. I don't spend, I was on a call just the other day for almost 3 hours with a couple and their family, preparing them for what they were going to do. 90% of that call was not talking about financial advice. It wasn't talking about these things. It was helping them understand. In a way it was, but we were really helping them understand the investments in a way to get over the emotional hurdles they had. Whereas the son, who was much younger, different generation, was like saying exactly the same thing I was to his parents. They weren't listening to their son because, well, it's their son, right? But when we finished the call, it was clear that, suddenly the information was registering different. And we have this conversation many times. Many of our clients, we engage with the family. I mean, several in the last couple months where we had the family there, and it's just this, it's the idea of getting information from a source that's not your own. Now, this leads me into the point where you say, well, do I really need an advisor? How does that really help me? And here's what I'd say to that. Being an advisor for 23 years, helping so many people, I would tell you this: whether you are the smartest guy or not, or you're horrible at investing, you're great. We have both sides, women and men that are doing it on their own. But when they call us and they engage with us and ask questions, very often we have to kind of steer them in another direction and prevent them from making big mistakes. So it's the amount of mistakes that we as advisors prevent to our clients, even the ones that kind of think they know what they're doing, that will oftentimes finally kind of come to a point where they're like, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore. I just want to do it and have you guys do it because I keep going the wrong direction and I might as well just have you do it. So it's not so much that, it's not to say you're not smart, you're not capable. The question is, how many hours do you want to commit to it? Do you have access to everything that's available? And then the last little key point to that is when you're picking an advisor, I'll just leave you with this one last thing. If you want someone that's a fiduciary, now this is a big buzzword these days. You can Google it. There's fee-based, fee-only, commission. I've been doing a lot of research on this to kind of see what everybody is telling people. And here's my 2 cents on that. If you are a financial advisor that is working with clients with all different needs, you want someone that's a fiduciary, but you want someone that can offer you anything. This is my opinion. And I say that because everybody at different age ranges and of what their mind is at might have a different need. So when you go to an advisor that only sells insurance, or in that case, they'd be an insurance agent, every problem has one solution. They're going to sell you insurance. If you went to company ABC that has a set of mutual funds, you're assuming that that company is the best in every category. Whereas an advisor that has access to everything is going to be able to pick from everything. So we're going to do one on that in a lot of detail, but it's just food for thought that you want someone that's a fiduciary that can pick from everything, because if you don't have access to everything, how can you be a fiduciary? Like if I didn't sell insurance and I knew my client really needed a specific insurance to protect them, how am I a fiduciary if I can't offer it to you? The only other outside thing is they could recommend you go to someone else to buy it. Okay, that is true. But then I'm having to send my client to someone that maybe I don't know or trust. And it's better if we can do as much in a holistic way for you rather than having you all over the place. That's the probably the most important part. So questions, Marche?
All right. So we had some good questions that came in, and I will tell our attendees, go ahead and chat in the chat if you'd like to ask questions while we're going along. It is private, so the other attendees probably will not see anything. So can you talk about the most common mistakes that you see people making when they're doing financial planning for themselves? Some of the most common mistakes.
If you're literally doing it for yourself, that's a big topic. I mean, that's a lot of what we talked about today. I think the biggest mistake is they either are way too safe with their investments out of fear. We see this a lot with people that have huge amounts of money in the bank just sitting. Maybe they put it in a CD, but they're just not keeping up. They can't get over that hurdle of knowing, how do I get comfortable with more growth in my portfolio, but still being committed to feeling okay. Or it's the opposite. They're way too aggressive. They think that they know what they're doing. They're investing it on their own, and they're too aggressive, and then they hit a wall. They don't understand the time value of money. They don't understand, the way to draw it down so that you're not running out. What's the best way to pull it? They don't have a true plan because they're often using online software that's limited. We pay thousands of dollars a year for the software we use that's constantly updated with the tax laws and everything, that's all dialed in with CPAs. So the biggest problem is most people just don't have the tools. And then again, it's that what you don't know can be a problem. If you knew how many people we talked to that were like, God, I didn't know that. I wish I'd talked to you 10 years ago. That is the most common conversation I have with people. It's usually the ones that have never talked to someone. They're 50 plus, maybe even not that old. And they finally just decide, okay, I'm going to talk to you. And if you knew how many people thanked us for kind of pushing them a little bit, kind of trying to nudge them along and realize that it's okay. And yes, I know you don't like paying people, but is there a cost to doing it yourself? And could an advisor do better? Most of our clients, if you talk to our clients, they would tell you, and that's a good thing to do, is ask your advisor for referrals. We're happy to open up and say, randomly pick some people, and assuming that they're, willing to talk to you, you can call them up and ask them for yourself. Was it worth paying for that service or doing it yourself? So what's the other question?
Yeah. What's a typical fee for a fiduciary?
Fees can range. In our industry, you'll hear 1% to 2% is what the fees typically are. Some will go slightly under just to look, like they're being super competitive. I would say that you've got to understand all the moving parts of fees. When you're hiring a fiduciary, or a fee only, I would say within that 1% to 2% range is the most common.
All right. You talked about some people are overconfident with their money. Can you talk about the pitfalls of being overconfident and go back to that sentiment about happiness?
Okay.
What's the danger of that again?
Well, I think when you're overconfident, it can be a misbelief that you have enough money. It could be a misbelief that your investments are just fine, because you maybe haven't entered into that transition of retirement yet. So you've been in the working years, you've been your accumulation years, and then suddenly now, because that's worked for you, the fact that you made money and you didn't, maybe from here to here, you didn't lose money from point A to point B, right? But now you're in retirement and you're actually drawing on it. Those assets need to make sure you really need to be able to stress test that. And if you're too confident, I mean, look, I would say we're always overly cautious. We run everything with built-in scenarios to be the opposite of that. worst case scenario? What's our disaster outcome? What's our backup plan? We have layers of backup plans so that we know if this fails, this, not that I don't like to use the word fail, but if something's not working the way planned, or maybe someone has expenses that are higher than anticipated, what are we going to do then? So you always have to have a moving target in a retirement account unless you want to go back to work. So being too confident just means you're not looking out of the box. You're settling for what's in front of you, I think, is part of that.
All right. Another question about fees. Are fees annual, and how are they taken out of investments? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, most fees for advisors are going to be taken out. They give you an annual cost. So let's say they're charging you 1% a year. They typically are going to take it out on a quarterly basis. It comes out of your account, and it would be based on the ending quarter value. So a quarter of one, so 0.25 of the balance on the end of the March 31st statement. So as the advisor, it's in their interest for your account to naturally go up. And if it goes down, the same thing. You'll hear people talking about, I'm not even going to quote stuff, but in our industry, advisors are paid when your account's going up and when it's going down. The reason is if everybody stopped paying fees when their account went down for a year, every firm would go out of business. That's when you need them to get you back on track, right? So, for people that are nervous about fees, what I would challenge you is to understand that what advisors bring to the table is hopefully improving your return, even if the advisor is a little bit more than you arguably doing it on your own. Now, again, you're going to go online and see a lot of stuff on this. Well, remember, there's low cost investments and there's investments that are more. When an advisor is charging you a fee, we only get paid on the better you do. So in other words, if I picked a fund that was 3 times the cost of the fund that you could buy, it's because I really believe it's going to perform better, because I can also buy the really inexpensive one as well. So the advisor's not, you want to make sure your advisor's not getting compensated by the 12B1 fees, the hidden fees, kickbacks. So a true advisor that's the fiduciary that is running on like a fee only or fee-based style is only getting paid on that fee they charge you. The expenses of the fund are a secondary component that are, for most people, hidden. It's what you see in your 401ks, at your Fidelities and Schwabs and T. Rowe's. It's not transparent. Some advisors like us have many products that are actually transparent. So you'll know the cost of the fund and you'll know the cost of the advisor. So what you're paying the advisor to do, if you think about it, is your investments are like you owning a car. There's a small operating expense. Okay, maybe one gets better gas mileage than the other, so it costs a little bit more, but you save on gas, that kind of mentality. We're helping you drive it. You're paying us in a sense to help drive this whole thing for you. So the better we do, the better you do, and vice versa. So that's a little longer answer, Marche, but
that's okay.
Talk about fees.
It's a good one to end on, because people are nervous about this topic, and making it more digestible, understandable is one of the reasons we do these webinars. Yeah. Well, folks, that's about all the time we have today. I want to thank both Sean and the organizations that have made this webinar possible today. To our attendees, look for an email soon with a link to the replay of this event, and you're welcome to share that replay with friends and family. Here at Advice Chaser, we're all about helping you find a financial advisor who's a great fit for your life and your financial questions. Our matching service is free to you, and every one of our advisor partners has committed to offer a free initial consultation to anyone we introduce them to. Find out more by going to advicechaser.com and clicking on the link to find an advisor. We're getting some thank yous in the chat, and we want to thank you too for being here. We will hopefully see you at another webinar soon. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.